Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. On behalf of the Higher Education Programs in the Hispanic Serving Institutions Division, thank you for joining us today for our Storytelling with APR Data webinar. Please be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and by participating, you authorize the Department of Education to do the things that are on the screen. We will also be adding this webinar to the HSI Division YouTube playlist. Today, we will be hearing from two of our grantees at the University of Puerto Rico, Aguadilla, and in Puerto Rico, and Mercy College in New York State. At the end, we will have a few moments for questions and comments. However, we do ask that if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and we will ask the questions of the presenters after they have completed their presentations. Just a little bit of background information for your reference. And for those of you who have just come on, please know that both these slides and the slides from our presenters will be made available to our grantees. So why are we doing this today? Because the ability to communicate effectively with data is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity. And we can use data as an important tool to make our story and our narrative most effective. I encourage everyone to check out the effective data storing website referenced on this slide. What do we mean by telling a story with data? Well, one of the formal definitions of data story is a web-based article that integrates text, visual artifacts, and interactives. Data stories help us to present complex information with compelling resonance. And remember that when you are telling a story with data, you are often gearing it at a general audience who may not be familiar with all of the technical terms that you use in your work or that you use in your projects. Sharing some resources for storytelling with data. This is a standard book in the field. You can find it on Amazon or any bookstore. I've shared their website as well as the major lessons that Ms. Nussbaumer shares in her very, very compelling book. Here are some additional resources on telling stories with data. If you are Department of Education employees, the resources on the left-hand column are for you. Please check out all of the learning bites put out by our colleagues, as well as, you may have remembered from this morning, don't forget about our great celebration in January, the Ed Data Vispalooza, January 22nd to 25. For grantees and educators, we've included special resources for you on the right-hand side. And I encourage all of you to take a look at the links that we've provided, especially the ones at the bottom, which are specific to our federal agency. The main reason we're here today is because we want to take the information that we provide on our APRs and transform them into a compelling story. And I hope this slide helps you see how what we see on the right is a lot more interesting and a lot more compelling than what we see on the left. That's what we're trying to get at. Our first distinguished speaker today is Dr. Jesus Lee Borges from the University of Puerto Rico, Aguadilla, and he will be talking about the work that they do in their Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions grant from FY 2021. Next, we will hear from Dr. Irina Ellison. She is the Associate Dean at Mercy College, and they have a Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions 2021 grant. And Dr. Gabrielle Haynes is the external evaluator for Mercy College's DHSI grant, and she will also be presenting for us today. So the key takeaway here is that effective communication means that you're integrating your narrative with your data. Remember that only you can tell your story. Use your data effectively to make an unforgettable one. Thank you so much. We will now turn it over to Dr. Lee, And here are the email addresses for everyone so that we can continue this great conversation.
Okay, I'm trying to share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
No. You can?
We can
I'm
see
trying
your
to get
screen.
help here. Okay, so it's good. If I, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Jesus Lee Borges. I'm the project director of a Title V Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions here at the University of Puerto Rico in Aguadilla. Our project is titled Intervention, Mentoring, and Curricular Reform, an integrated approach to improve student outcome at UPR Aguadilla. Before I begin, I'd like to make a disclaimer. The contents of this presentation were developed under a grant from the Department of Education. However, those contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the Department of Education and should not assume endorsement by the federal government. That taken care of, let's move on to our presentation. And my main goal today is giving you an idea of how you can take numbers, data, and transform them into a story so you can present the outcomes, the success story of your project. Our goal of our project was to increase in student outcomes through curricular reform, early detection, early warning, and peer mentoring. Here we have our 6 activities. Develop a strong foundation in online learning, a mentor-based student support program, early detection, dual enrollment, where we have students from high school, 11th and 12th grade, taking courses here in the university so they can start with up to 6 credits of approved university credits. We have a summer remedial camp, and we have an improving the physical learning environment. These are our key measures. I won't go into detail of each one. And I'm sure that this looks familiar to all of your projects. This is basically what we proposed and what we were giving our funds to achieve. This is summarized in our logic model. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of our logic model in developing our project evaluation, in developing and seeing the progress of our project. And the logic model is what our project revolves around. This is our sun. This should be our roadmap to success. This is our logic model. We have here our 6 activities. We have outputs. We have our outcomes. We have short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And we use this as our guide in developing not only our activities, but developing what data we should be collecting and how we should be collecting that data and how we should be interpreting that data. Talking about data, I'd like to show you some of the tools we here at the University of Puerto Rico are using to obtain the data we later use to make data-driven decisions about our project. Most of our pre and post tests and of all of our workshops are done in Microsoft Forms. Recently, and by recommendation of our external evaluator, we have begun to use COBOL Toolbox. And if you have not used COBOL Toolbox, I highly recommend that you take a look into this database. It's free. It's an open source. So if your IT people want to edit it or make some modifications to it, they are able to do it because it's an open source project program. All you have to do to use it is to create an account. I will show you our main page in COBOL Tools. Here we have all our evaluations for all our workshops. We have the reports for the mentors, for the mentees, for all stakeholders that do some kind of paperwork. We have basically gone paper-free in the project because we have started using COBOL tools. As an added bonus, our external evaluator has continuous access to all the information as we gather it. So it's not like we just send our information once or twice or 3 times a year to an external evaluator. We're continuously sharing our information with our external evaluators. So if he sees something that's worrisome, something that might not be working out, he can not only give us a heads up, he can give us ideas on how to make this activity better. We also use our university databases. We're in continuous communication with the registrar's office so they can send us the information that we need to update our data. Recently, the University of Puerto Rico as a system was granted a Title III, Title III grant to develop a portal where all the information for all the campuses are available. And this is, again, open source. Anybody can have access to this information. It's a database powered by Microsoft Power BI. And we have here the data for 10, 15 years of courses, pass, fail rates. We have admissions, admission data. So these are all very powerful tools that allow us to gather data. Even if you don't have specific data for your campuses, there are general resources. The Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System is the official database of the U.S. government for post-secondary institution in the United States. So there you have the data that your institution is reporting to IPEDS. When we fill out our APRs, they ask us to provide the graduation rate, 4-year, 6-year graduation rate, the retention rate, based on what the university reports to IPEDS. And this information is readily available to everybody. There's also the National Center for Education Statistics, another national global base where you can get information not only on your institution, but on other institutions that might be similar. And if you wanted to do a baseline or gather information about how your university compares to other universities of similar size and similar composition, these are great resources. There's HACU, the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, and of course the Census Bureau, where we can get demographic information about different areas of the United States. So we have all these sources of information, and data sometimes can be overwhelming. We have so much data. What do we do with it? How can we keep this data and make it visually appealing and allow us at the same time to track the implementation of our project? One of the resources we use here at the UPR Aguadilla is the use of a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is a tool used in program management. It's a useful way of illustrating your project and your plan. And as Margarita at the beginning of the webinar commented, we want to make our project as appealing as possible. We want to make our story as accessible as possible. And presenting the data in a organized and in a way that is visually appealing goes a long way towards that. The Gantt chart makes a chronological bar displaying activities against time, which for us is great because we have to have deadlines on our activities. We have short-term, mid-term, long-term goals. We have X number of years to comply with our project objectives. These are not open activities that can just finish when we reach our goal. So having this ability to see how our objectives are moving forward against a timeline is an excellent tool. Gantt chart is one of the templates that MS Excel has available. So if you have Excel, you can have access to a Gantt chart. There are different templates, from simple templates to more complex templates. Our external evaluator was essential, not only in suggesting that we use a Gantt chart to graph or to visualize our project and our progression in that project, but also in developing the Gantt chart that we are using, that in a couple of minutes I will share with you. This is an overview of our year 2 Gantt chart. I'll show you in more detail how the different parts are detailed. And when we made our Gantt chart, we made sure that our Gantt chart was aligned with our logic model. And I don't know if you noticed that I've given emphasis to our logic model, and everything has to be in context of the logic model. Our logic model is going to be our roadmap, is going to be essential in order for us to develop a good Gantt chart that really gives us the information that we need. So this is our logic model. This is how we transform this logic model into a Gantt chart that allows us to see the graphic highlights of our project. This is the Gantt chart for project year 2. We have 6 activities, so we had 6 areas. We had the timeline where we were able to see how our activities were progressing, not only in completion, but in terms of the allotted timeline that we proposed for that activity. On the top right part, we see there the overall progress, the completion rate, and the performance of our project in terms of what was proposed in our logic model. If you see on the bottom, there are different tabs, and each tab is a different note on the worksheet. We have our project overview, which is the whole project with all 6 activities, but then we have each activity individually. So we can go and see, this is the teacher certification for online teaching and learning. We have there all the professors that took the certification, in what status were they on? Were they finished certification? Were they in progress? If they were in progress, how far along were they? We also had a tab for all the different activities. So we had one for online teaching, for mentoring, for early detection, for summer, for dual enrollment, infrastructure, etc. And there we could easily notice activities that were not up to par. One of the problems we've had with one of the activities was our early detection, early intervention. When we began our project, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. We were on online courses. The year after that, we came back and we were on and off for a while. So that was really challenging. And we've had a little trouble getting this activity off the ground. And that tab shows that we're only able to complete 31 of the activities that we proposed for that time. And that gave me a heads up that I had to get this activity up and running in my 3rd year. And I've given special attention to make sure that we have the early detection, early intervention activity as far along as we can in this year. This is for the dual enrollment. We have there the students that were taking courses here at the university, how many credits they took, the grade that they had, if they completed or if they did not complete the course. This is our mentoring program. We have there the mentor, the mentees, liaison officers. What were their, we have on top the baseline. Those are students that are part of the university that share a similar background to our students, but are not part of the project, are not mentors, are not mentees. And what was their average number of credits attempted, average number of credits passed, their completion rate, and their average GPA. We have there on green the mentees, and on like a reddish color the mentors. So we were able to see how they were doing and how the activity was impacting them, not only if they liked it or didn't like it, but in terms of numbers. Did they really increase their completion rate of credits attempted and completed? Did their GPA improve, or if it didn't? So this is all part of making sure that when we make decisions, we're making decisions based on the numbers, based on the data that we have. And I want to mention two examples of how we have used all this data that we have collected, all this data that we have organized in our Gantt chart to make modifications to some of our activities, to make sure the activity is up to par and moving along in a positive way towards achieving our long-term goals. The first example is with our summer remedial camp. As I mentioned, the first year we offered our summer remedial camp, we were right in the middle of the pandemic, and we offered our summer remedial camp online. And it wasn't as we had designed in the proposal, but it was, for the time being, good enough. Our second year, we were in person and online. It was more or less 1 week we were here, 1 week we were not. And we asked ourselves, how should the summer camp be? Should it be in person or should it be virtual? And not depending only on taking shots in the dark, we sent out a questionnaire to the prospective students of the summer remedial camp, and we asked them, how would you like the summer camp to be? Would it like to be in person, or would you like to be in a virtual? The grand majority preferred that the camp be held in person. We also asked them, when would you prefer the camp to be? In June, in mid-July? And we designed our summer camp based on the answers, on the data we had gathered from the prospective students. And yes, that could be only a small detail and not life-changing in terms of our project, but it's an example of how you can use the data to advance your project and to make sure that your story is as you would like it to be told. Another example is a more robust one, and this is based on our mentoring-based student support program. In our mentoring-based support program, again, we started online, then we came back and it was part online, part in person. And our third year, when we began fully in person, we noticed that we were having trouble retaining mentees. And talking to fellow project directors, I know that one of the main challenges we encounter is that it's easy to recruit mentors, it's easy to recruit tutors, but recruiting mentees, recruiting students to take these tutoring or student services is sometimes challenging. So we encountered that we were losing mentees. Mentees were dropping out through the semester, and we were ending up with mentors that had no mentees. At the end of the year, we had 5, 6 mentors that had no mentees because all of them had dropped out through the semester. And we wanted to make our resources as robust as possible. Not going to pay the mentees, are not going to, if for them to actually not be doing anything. So we decided to have like a pilot project. And we thought of the idea of using these mentors, or using part of the mentors, to go to schools, to high schools, and give workshops to students. Most were science workshops. These are pages taken from the social pages of the school we went. It's called the Benito Cerezo School here in Aguadilla. And we went there on 2 occasions. We went there first to offer them a workshop on career opportunities in science, especially women in STEM. All the students that went were female. The second time we went, we offered them a practical workshop on making plastics. We also offered them a workshop on recycling, part of the green science workshops. And we think that this could be an efficient way to modify our project and use and maximize our mentors. Another modification we made to our mentoring component was have a student mentor have regular hours. Maybe the mentees did not want the commitment of having to be with the mentor through the semester, but they might need mentor at some times of the semester. So one of the rules we modified into a flexible learning center, one of our mentors has a schedule, and he's there Monday and Wednesday from 11 to 12 noon, Fridays from 11 to 12:30. And any students that might want to go there for mentoring, any question in particular about resources in the university, anything that might be worrisome to student, he can go there and just ask the student without having to make the commitment that I'm going to be a mentor through the whole semester. We still don't know how successful this is going to be or not. We're just gathering the data because we began this semester. But after the semester is done, we compile the data and determine if this is something that might be useful or not. So to review, data is essential in allowing us to tell a story about our project. I know that as project directors, one of the things that we're always asked, how's your project going? And in terms of just giving a yes, it's going okay, or a subjective answer, with data, we can give objective measures of how our project is progressing. We can also evaluate project outcomes. We can identify project strengths and weaknesses and maybe modify our budget in terms of giving more support to the strength or to the weaknesses, depending on what we think is needed. Determine project efficiency, and most important of all, support data-driven decision making. We have to make decisions based on the data. And I'll just finish with this. And I have no idea how that photo is being. For my sake, I'll assume you're all there on the floor laughing at the joke and seeing how intelligent it was, but have no idea. But yes, the data is out there. We can go get it and we can use it to tell our story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. That was an awesome presentation. We did not have any questions per se in the chat, but we did have a lot of comments asking about tutorials that may be available for the Gantt chart, as well as if we could have a separate webinar just on the Gantt chart. So there's a lot of enthusiasm about that. We will follow up with you regarding that and make sure that we share those additional resources with our attendees. I did have one question for you as I was listening to you talk about, in specific referencing the Gantt chart. Could you talk just for a moment about how having this Gantt chart has changed the buy-in or the communication that you've had with the leadership at the university and any other stakeholders? You alluded a moment to about how you respond when people ask how your project is going. Well, I can imagine with that Gantt chart, when you get that question from higher ups, your response is much more impactful.
Yes, and you're completely correct. One of the, when I'm talking to stakeholders, when I'm talking to the administration, one of the usual questions is, how's the project going? And the usual answer is, it's going great. Thumbs up, right? It's peachy. But with the Gantt chart, I can not only tell them that's going great, that's going peachy, I can show them. And usually when I send them the Gantt chart, they're very impressed that I've been able to objectively tell them how the project is going. And I don't have to say it's going good. They can see how it's going. They can see the numbers. And if they have any questions or any, okay, why is this activity not moving along? Then we can talk about that, those specific. But yes, you're completely right. It's an excellent tool to give the stakeholders, give the administration, and not only tell them, but show them how the story of our project is moving along.
Thank you again, Dr. Lee. That was wonderful. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Ellison, who will begin the presentation from Mercy College, and then Dr. Haynes will complete it. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Margarita. Bienvenidos a todos. Feliz mes de la herencia hispana. We're so thrilled to be with you this morning or this afternoon. Just moving to the correct slide here to get us started. So we want to begin our story just telling you a little bit about our motivation for our project, which is our Access Grant, Advancing Curricular Change to Enhance Student Success. And so our story begins across the United States and in New York City in particular, where we have a robust and growing Latina population, but unfortunately we see clear disparities in health outcomes between Latinas and their non-Latina counterparts. So this is an example here in this image of some of our health outcomes in our New York City population, where we see that there's a clear health disparity with the Latino population at much higher rates without insurance, higher rates of obesity in both men and women, and higher rates of diabetes. And of course, during the COVID pandemic, this came to light even more. We saw that Latinos account for about 20% of the US population, but had much higher rates of COVID, and I'm sure even much higher than the image has here. We also saw that pregnant Latina women had higher rates of COVID than their non-Latino counterparts, and that Latinos were hospitalized from the virus at much higher rates than their white counterparts. So what causes these health disparities? Thankfully, it's not biology, it's not genetics, right? Instead, we know that these health disparities are predominantly caused by what we call the social determinants of health. Those complex, integrated, and overlapping social structures, policies, economic systems that affect health outcomes, such as income inequalities, educational disparities, food insecurity, systemic racism. And the good news about this is that these are systems and policies and structures that we can overcome. And we know some very specific strategies to close health outcome gaps. So, three in particular that we've focused on are increasing educational opportunities, increasing workforce representation, and improving access to culturally competent care. Because we know that increased racial and ethnic diversity in practicing health professionals has a demonstrable impact, decreasing health disparities by promoting better access and improved quality of healthcare for underserved minority populations. When we look at representation in the New York area, what we see that is that there's again, disparity in representation. So the blue bars here represent over a 10-year period the population of physicians, the percentage of physicians in comparison to the orange bar, which is the general population, the percentage of the general population. And so what we see is that in white and Asian populations, the representation of physicians is very strong and indeed higher than the general population. And that in Hispanic and Black populations, that the representation of physicians is less than the general population. And again, we know that this can lead to health disparities. We see the same pattern here presenting in dentists. And when we look at nursing, we see a slightly different pattern. We see the same pattern in terms of white representation and Asian representation in terms of nurses being more highly represented than the general population in those areas. We also see in the Black population that the representation is very strong for nurses. Unfortunately, still in the Hispanic population, we see this disparity between the representation of nurses in the field and the general population. Mercy University is located in New York, as Margarita mentioned. We're at 3 campuses across New York. Our main campus is about 30 minutes north of New York City, right here on the Hudson River. You see this beautiful image here. And we have an additional campus at Herald Square. If any of you are familiar with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, we're right across the street. And then our third campus is located in the Bronx. Our mission at Mercy is to create transformative pathways forward for all students, especially underserved minoritized students. BIPOC students make up about 75% of our population of 9,000 undergraduate and graduate students, and many of our students are first generation students with low EFCs or estimated family contributions. Over 70% are Pell eligible, and Mercy has the lowest private tuition in New York State. Mercy is New York State's largest private nonprofit HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. We are celebrating 25 years as an HSI this year. We're thrilled about that. And we've recently been recognized by Excelencia in Education with the Seal of Excelencia. About 44% of Mercy students are Latina, and we have a 10% increase in Latina student enrollment over the last 7 years, representing the changing demographics in our area. Mercy issues the fourth most undergraduate degrees to Latina students among private HSIs in the continental US, and we've been recognized by both the White House and by HACU for our efforts in supporting Latina student success. One of the wonderful things about supporting Latina student success is that we know this really supports the success of all students. And so we see that Mercy also awards more bachelor's degree to Black students each year than Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and Dartmouth combined. Indeed, we tied with Spelman for our ranking of bachelor's degrees awarded nationally to Black students among predominantly in-person private institutions. Within our School of Health and Natural Sciences and our School of Nursing, we enroll about 3,000 health professions and STEM students each year. And so we're uniquely positioned to support the success of Latina students and to create a pipeline for building a more diverse health profession. Unfortunately, one of the barriers to student success is our anatomy and physiology. This has been identified as the #1 obstacle for persistence in the health professions programs at Mercy. And we see that our rate of non-success is at about 35 or so percent in both our anatomy and physiology lecture and lab. And this is unfortunately right in line with the national failure rate of anatomy and physiology. We also saw, very concerning, that we had an equity gap within our anatomy and physiology. So we see on the left side here our anatomy and physiology lecture, looking at in the blue bar, which is our Latina students, we're successful at about 62% in that area, and our white counterparts were at about 80%, and labs kind of similar pattern on the right side here. And we know that COVID impacted this even further, that there was not only tremendous learning loss, but trauma. And again, touching back to that, those health disparities that we saw disproportionately impacting Latina families in this area. And again, we see this as a national trend. In 2022, 72% of students had to repeat anatomy and physiology. So we really want to shift the narrative from anatomy and physiology being a gatekeeper and uh, filtering out students to really propelling students forward. And our Title V grant addresses this through two main goals. The first is by improving student success in anatomy and physiology. And the second is through expanding access to health professions programs, specifically to our second degree accelerated nursing program. So we're going to focus today on our first initiative, our Improving Student Success in Anatomy and Physiology program. And we're going to talk to you about a couple of examples of the ways that we've used data to tell our story and really to revise our story and shift our program. So just as Dr. Lee mentioned, we're really focused on our logic model as this guiding pathway forward. A lot of our initiatives from the onset of our program really talked about supporting students both before the semester and during the semester. So we're expanding our supplemental instruction program, focusing on training, transforming our lab experience for our students, and building a pre-semester accelerator, a student success orientation for anatomy and physiology, so that students were ready to go when they walked in the door. In collecting data, some common data points to consider collecting. We create satisfaction surveys for all events and programs that we have. We generally use Qualtrics as our data um, uh, system to collect that data. We collect data from attendance at all events and trainings and programs. So we have a swipe system that's connected to EAB, which we use at our institution. Teams and Zoom, of course, also collect that kind of attendance data. So you can always pull that data from Teams and Zoom. We collect grades on formative and summative assessments. Our learning management system, Blackboard, we're able to go in and pull some of those assessments directly from Blackboard. And we also get our faculty to work on live files to input grades when we need that. We gather tallies on event numbers, applications, registrations, typically through Microsoft Forms. We use validated instruments from the literature, and we've modified some of these validated instruments to collect data. Again, typically we are collecting that data through Qualtrics. We've collected focus group data through Zoom recordings and transcripts, and then of course institutional data. Our institutional data is available to all faculty through the Tableau system, and then we can also work with our institutional research department on other types of data that we might need beyond what's available to us on Tableau. So these are things like final course grades and demographic data. Our system of using this data, we first develop our outcome measure and data administration plan. We gather the data. We analyze the data in real time, and you'll hear a little bit from my colleague, Dr. Haynes, about how we work together as a team to, again, analyze that data in real time. We evaluate effectiveness of the data collection. So were we able to get students to complete surveys? If not, how do we go back and revise that system? So it's not just about the data that we're capturing in terms of the outcome of the actual data, but has the plan worked? Are we able to actually effectively collect the data that we need? We evaluate the impact of the intervention or the outcome. Of course, a key element of this is disseminating those findings both to our local communities within our institution regionally, and then of course across the country as well. So we've been fortunate to be able to present some of our findings at conferences like HAKU and ASI, and of course that feedback from our colleagues is so useful, and we're able to integrate that and then revise our activities, our outcome measures, and our data administration plans as needed. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of examples of where we've used this process of feedback and development to really modify our plans. Our first example.
I think your slide didn't advance because the things you just said, I know you had a slide showing all of that and it didn't advance. You're still on the common data points.
Oh, okay. Let me see. I'm seeing it.
Unless it's only my computer, maybe. I'm not sure.
Are people seeing a circular data collection and analysis paradigm slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Dr.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Mine is stuck somehow. Okay, sorry.
No, not at all. Okay, great. So we're going to give you an example of one of the ways that we've used this feedback, and that's through a project that we developed, an exam wrapper project. So for those of you who might not be familiar with exam wrappers, these are a metacognitive tool. It's a reflective tool where students can reflect on their exam preparation, any obstacles that they may have encountered to success, and analyze their performance and really create a plan for an improvement. These types of tools have been known to improve metacognitive skills through self-evaluation, but they're really shown that the data really suggests the biggest improvement for students who are already having strong outcomes, who are strong test takers. So some sample questions that you might ask on an exam wrapper: how many hours did you spend studying? Can you identify common patterns where questions were missed? What kind of challenges or obstacles may you have experienced? We also incorporated into this intervention an academic coaching piece. And so students here were working with an academic coach to review their exam preparation, to review the exam content and patterns of missed questions, and discuss the effective study skills and how they might prepare for exams in the future. So in our first iteration of this exam wrapper project, we had students completing the metacognitive wrapper and working with an external non-faculty coach one-on-one to go through that academic coaching process. So this was somebody who we hired and was part of our tutoring center, and the students could sign up for one-on-one sessions. And what we found was that through this process, there was a little bit of a disconnect because the person was not a faculty member, wasn't as familiar with our exams. There were issues in terms of the logistics of getting the exams to them and having them review the exams with the students and just really adhere to our protocol. So we then switched in our next iteration, learning that from our first process, to work one-on-one with the faculty. Now, one of the challenges here was that our faculty, in needing to have these one-on-one meetings with the students, some of our sections are quite large. And so it became an issue of trying to manage so many of these individual one-on-one meetings with students, and it became difficult. So in our last iteration, we moved to a group coaching model. So the faculty were able to meet with groups of students instead of one-on-one, and also provide that metacognitive experience for all of our students instead of those who just were struggling with their exams. So we broadened this program to all of the students, whether they were struggling on exams or whether they weren't, and offered the coaching in a group format. Of course, we wanted to see what the outcomes were for our students. So we saw that students who participated in our program, that the percentage of students with improved grades on subsequent exams was quite high. So 78% under the first iteration where they were meeting one-on-one with their faculty member, and actually 80% when they were working with the faculty in a group setting. The other interesting finding that we had was that those who didn't participate in the program, in other words, didn't complete the full entire iteration, but were exposed to different parts of the program because we had expanded it to everyone, that we also saw some improvements in that group as well. So we were really excited by that data, because obviously we're able to offer this at kind of a lower cost by having group meetings with faculty, less of a burden on faculty time, but still see great results for our students in terms of their success. Another example that I want to cover quickly was our faculty lab satisfaction. So one of the changes that we made, one of the interventions that we had, was really to fully redesign our lab curriculum. And this was obviously a big shift for our faculty. We integrated a lot of new technology, including our anatomage table. And so there had to be a lot of training and comfort with the faculty. And what we found that initially was that the faculty were not so satisfied, but those faculty were also those who didn't have the same level of fidelity of implementation. And what we realized was that really had to do with their faculty training. They weren't comfortable in using our technology yet. So we incorporated that feedback into the redesign, and we saw our satisfaction ratings from our faculty jump from 6.99 out of a scale of 10 up to 9.53. The last example I want to talk to you about was a remediation program that we created. And this is probably one of the most touching parts of our story for me, because it has some of the most exciting data that we've seen so far through our program. So our initial project was started towards the end of 2020. Obviously at that point, coming through the COVID pandemic, there was a real concern over the rate of non-success. We had, pretty high rates of non-success even prior to the pandemic, and we were obviously very concerned. And so from fall 2020 to spring 2021, we wanted to try to capture those students. This wasn't part of our initial grant plan, but because of what had happened with COVID between the time that we applied for our grant and moving forward, we really wanted to try to capture those students and work with those students. And thankfully, Margarita was so wonderful in supporting this initiative. So we worked with students between the two semesters, between the fall and spring semester, those who had not been successful in the fall semester, to try to get them back on track before the spring semester started so that they could move forward and not lose any progress. 83% of the students successfully completed the program, and when they moved forward in the subsequent class, 50% were successful in that subsequent course. So this was all really wonderful, but we've eliminated the program. Why have we eliminated the program when we saw pretty good results? Well, we eliminated the program because when we looked at the course grades after all of these interventions that we've done, recall, we've kind of added in additional supplemental instruction supports. We've redesigned our lab. We've created a pre-semester accelerator. We've really combined and scaffolded our programs. And what we've seen is that there's been a huge impact on student success in our Anatomy and Physiology 1. So the blue bars here represent fall 2019 pre-COVID data. Our red bars represent our first full semester fully out of any sort of modifications for COVID. So that's fall 2022. And what we see is a huge jump in student success from about 60% in lecture and 55 or so percent in lab up to 90 and 91% respectively. And when we looked at that equity gap that I was telling you about earlier, we also saw that we were able to close the equity gap. So what we're looking at here is the fall 2019 data, lecture and lab in whites and Latinas, and then the fall 2022 data. And what we see again is a complete closing of the equity gap and improving the success for all students across the course. So the wonderful news about this is that we eliminated our remediation program because we really didn't need it anymore. We saw such tremendous improvements across the board that we essentially were able to close out that program because we didn't have the critical mass of students anymore that weren't successful, which is a really great problem to have. Because of this wonderful feedback that we've gotten from our students, from our faculty, and of course the objective numbers that we've had, we're starting to think about how we move forward from this. And what we've heard from our students and our faculty is let's expand this to our next course, Anatomy and Physiology 2, and see if we can move in that direction. And again, that really aligns with our initial project goals, our logic model, what we're trying to achieve to really create that pipeline forward and create more diversity in our health professions. So again, really excited that Margarita is supporting these initiatives, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Haynes.
Thank you, Irina. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I want to apologize in advance if my internet connection goes out. I live in Puerto Rico and we're having a little bit of weather right now, so the camera's been freezing a little bit. If it's freezing, let me know and I'll just shut my camera off. So I want to talk a little bit about the way we've used data in real time, really, for the evaluation of this project. We started with these evaluation questions, which were written into the original proposal and which through the logic model, like Dr. Ellison mentioned, we've kept these evaluation questions at the forefront of the assessment throughout the entire project. First, we looked at the level of implementation fidelity for the project. Like, are the major activities happening and the deliverables occurring as proposed on time to the correct participants? And then based on that, what project improvements are indicated by the ongoing formative evaluation? And finally, what is the status of the progress toward attaining the intended outcomes? Like, how close are we to getting to reaching the goals that the project set forth in the first place? So where Dr. Ellison mentioned before that they were looking internally at satisfaction and participation data, for the evaluation, we tried really hard to look at impact data. So rather than looking at are the participants pleased with the activities, we're looking at how have these activities actually impacted the participants in terms of the goals of the project. You can go to the next slide.
It's on our end, Gabby.
Okay, it's not on mine, so I'm going to pull it up. So sorry. Okay, so one of the first good examples of our real-time use of data was the bilingual survey. So the project at the beginning, we set out to offer exams in both English and Spanish as an option to the students as an effort to improve outcomes for Hispanic students. And we surveyed these students about the bilingual exam option. We asked them really short, sweet questions. Did you use the bilingual option? Do you think it's useful? And even if you didn't use it, like, do you see a reason for us to continue? Something along those lines. And we administered that every semester for 2 full years. And consistently, the findings suggested that students were not using the bilingual exam option. So despite the fact that we felt like that was a good idea to have the exams offered in both Spanish and English, the data suggested that the students weren't using it. So we used those findings, those evaluative findings, to eliminate the bilingual exam option for the students. And you know, it's important to say that when we make modifications to the program in real time that way, even if it means eliminating a program component that we thought would be really successful, that frees up resources to focus on the program components that are actually impacting the students in the ways that we want them to. You can go to the next slide, please. Did it switch?
Yes.
Okay, so we've tried to keep the evaluation data informed, and that includes the analysis of the data and the reporting. So an example of this is that while we looked at the institutional data, the grades, the retention rates for the students, because that's what the Department of Education wants us to see, we also examined some, as Dr. Ellison mentioned, instruments that we got from the literature that are validated instruments looking at psychosocial constructs that are linked to student success. So we examined self-efficacy in STEM because we were looking at mostly STEM courses. We looked at sense of belonging because sense of belonging is important for historically minoritized students. And then we looked at desire to persist, how a student feels about their own ability to keep going and overcome challenges to remain in college, which is linked to retention. In order to examine those metrics, we surveyed the students with 30 plus, give or take a few items on each iteration of the survey. And every time we administered a pre-post survey looking at those perceptions, we modified the survey in real time based on the findings that we were getting. And so over time, we honed our survey into something that we felt like was the most efficient version of the survey that was gathering the data that we wanted. And when we went to present that in the reports, we realized that a table with 58 items is cumbersome and hard to interpret for anyone trying to read our results. So we reduced the data down to the construct. We performed reliability testing on each construct to determine that the items for sense of belonging worked together as a unit to measure sense of belonging. We did the same thing for self-efficacy and the same thing for persistence. And then when we made our report, visually, it was much more pleasing because we were able to just report on each metric, and we could show, we had matched data, so we could show the pre-scores for all of self-efficacy, the pre-scores for all of the sense of belonging items, and the pre-scores for the persistence items, and then the change for the post scores, which is another way to tell your story using data in a way that is accessible to everyone. Next slide. Did it switch?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Another example were the focus groups. So at the end of each semester, we conducted anonymous online focus groups with the students that served as learning fellows throughout the year. And we used that data and that we got from the students in real time to modify the very next iteration of the Learning Fellows program. So our students told us in the first focus group that they believed they needed more training, they needed more orientation for the program. They told us that they needed more communication with the faculty and more consistency with the way the faculty interact with the Learning Fellows. And we use that data in real time to inform the next iteration of the Learning Fellows program. And I didn't include it here, but a nice way to present focus group data is a word cloud. I would take the raw data and analyze it for themes and then make a word cloud and weight the words that emerged as themes in the data in the word cloud so that you can get a really nice visual of the exact words that the students said and what was important to them and what emerged from the data. Next slide.
All set.
Okay. And so finally, evaluation is more than just satisfaction data. As Dr. Ellison mentioned, satisfaction data were collected and analyzed internally, but for the external evaluation, it was important to gather data with impact in mind so that we could use that data to tell the story of what our students are experiencing in the Access program. So we gathered data and used tools with those ideas in mind, and we modified them in real time based on the findings that we would get. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we can take.
Yes, we just want to thank our institutions and our Access Grant team, and of course, muchísimas gracias to Margarita for all of the support throughout this process.
Wonderful. So thank you for an awesome presentation. Congratulations again to Mercy College for being recognized by Excelencia. I was trying to leave my cursor. We had some questions in the chat. I want to just get to a few of them because I know we're out of time. So the first question related to your presentation, Dr. Ellison and Haynes. The first question was, how do you encourage your faculty to participate in Blackboard and live grade input?
Yes. So the wonderful thing about Blackboard is that we've been able to go in. So if the faculty are inputting their grades in Blackboard, as long as they're there, we have administrative access. So we can go into their Blackboard shell and actually just pull the grades directly out from them. They don't have to do any additional work. So that's been really wonderful. In terms of Excel and getting them to work on like a live file or anything like that, you know, it has been a little bit tricky at times. I think one of the best pieces of advice that we have is really, as you're working through the project, to be cognizant of who is working on the project, and even indirectly, right, by working through these courses. And so we've been really intentional about who has been staffed in these courses and who is willing to really follow the protocols that we've set forth, really taking the time to explain to them what we're doing, why the data collection is so important. And that's been very helpful. Again, sometimes we've encountered other challenges like, you know, they might need additional training, and that's why they're not kind of being as faithful to our protocols as we would like. So in those cases, we've tried to provide those supports when they are needed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellison. And I think you spoke about this just now, but there was a related question. Are department chairs and deans consulted to integrate this practice within the departments?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the development of the grant and throughout the kind of execution of the grant, I serve as Associate Dean for our School of Health and Natural Sciences. I'm also have taught anatomy and physiology for many years, and so I'm kind of familiar with the curriculum. Almost all of our activity directors, actually all of our activity directors, are actively teaching the courses and integrated that way. So we're kind of in the trenches with the faculty who are asking to execute these projects.
Great. And then the last question, it's a very short answer. What was the N in the Student Success Program results?
The N in terms of like fall 2019, fall 2022?
Yes, I believe that's what they're referring to.
Right. So kind of our overall enrollment in anatomy and physiology every semester is in the fall semesters is generally around 300 students or so.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to all of you, Dr. Lee, Dr. Ellison, Dr. Haynes. Thank you very much. And Dr. Haynes, thank you for sticking in there with us, even with the bad weather. We know, what, you know, intense rain can do to the internet in Puerto Rico. So let me just again express our gratitude, and also, even though we said it a few times in the chat, just to ease everyone's anxiety, this has been recorded. We will be putting this up on the Hispanic Serving Institution Division playlist. So if you missed it or had to leave early or whatever, it will be on our YouTube. And yes, 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 we are sending the slides through G5 to all of our grantees, and that includes everybody's slides, including the introductory slides that I had at the beginning with additional resources. So thank you again to everyone, and especially to our presenters. We hope to see you back here tomorrow for my colleagues Corinne Abrams' presentation on the Open Textbooks Program Pilot Project. Thank you all and have a great evening. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.